What is up, everybody? This is Alex from IHE TV, and today I'm talking about E. coli. Everything in this movie looks like bacteria. Pixar's done it again, baby. I'm crying from the first second of this movie. Tears streaming. This scene is the one that kind of broke me. I just couldn't hack it, you know? I'm being a dick. I guess this movie... What is GrubHub? We don't have that in the UK. I don't even know, like, this meme. Why is it compared to GrubHub? Heck, they look an awful lot like Kroger or GrubHub ad. Am I missing something? You joking? This is a whole world I just know nothing about. Food Theorist has a 14 million view GrubHub lore video. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to talk about the actual movie now. What did I think of Elio, the infamous bomb, the movie that proves that general audiences don't want original stories and will never, ever go and see it, and it's nothing to do with marketing or design or aesthetics. I thought this movie looked incredibly boring from the advertising. It does not shock me that this film bombed. The name is bad. The heart of what the story is just wasn't really communicated through any of this. In fact, I was dreading this worm thing showing up because I assumed it would be the typical animated dog-coded Dibby. But this actually wound up being alright. I didn't actually despise this. Nothing particularly interesting from a concept level, but it did do some things that I found quite intriguing. This isn't an Elemental situation where, like, the world building is insufferable and the characters are unlikable. I guess people like Elemental, huh? And it actually wound up making money somehow. And I guess being Pixar's third foray into sci-fi space storytelling, with WALL-E, Lightyear, and now this, it's kind of 1 for 3. Because while I did like some things about this, it was kind of overall a miss. It just couldn't find its footing, and I think largely because it had its creative backbone kind of ripped out of it. So what am I getting at with that? In 2023, Pixar released a trailer for this movie where the whole story is different. A lot of familiar elements, but like the abduction scene, for example. I'm going to spoil this movie, by the way. Like, there's not that much to spoil. It's the most like formulaic Pixar movie you can imagine. But still, here's a warning, in case you want to watch it yourself first. But yeah, the abduction scene, in the final cut of the movie, he's having like a fight with some other kids, and the whole angle of him being obsessed with space and really wanting to be abducted by aliens, I guess, was changed. Because in this trailer, he seems to have a bit more fear about him, and he doesn't really want it to happen. A lot of the same kind of design, the character designs are mostly the same, except big kind of changes being this villain is just on this council. And you can see towards the end was more positioned as some kind of comic relief, or something like this, with an art book revealing that the main antagonist was probably going to be a clone of Elio. Cloning's like a big part of the story. So what happened to this version of the movie? Well, basically, Pixar CEO Pete Docter decided to pivot away from, quote, personal stories in favor of universal appeal films, and Elio was heavily reworked to meet this new goal. You can see it indicated in the 3 directors credited here. This was originally helmed by Adrian Molina, who was the co-director of Coco, which is a lot better than this movie. So it's supposedly supposed to be more autobiographical and be more inspired by the director's lonely childhood and how he overcame his loneliness. So they brought in Domi Shi, I hope that's how you say her name, who's worked on a bunch of Pixar stuff, but most notably directed Turning Red, which was pretty decent. I just found it quite weird how it didn't even mention 9/11 once, and this woman here, Madeline Sharafian, whose work I haven't seen as a director. So what all this behind-the-scenes drama amounts to is kind of this weird, incomplete, somewhat directionless film. I guess the GrubHub meme is kind of getting at the way that this film looks like an AI-generated advertisement that's designed to look more like a Disney Pixar movie than it actually is when you sit down and watch it. Because for me, whenever it was trying to do the stereotypical Pixar emotional manipulation checklist was when I disliked it the most. And I was kind of into it when it was allowing itself to be whimsical, lighthearted, and weird. Like I mentioned that E. coli thing, I made that joke at the beginning. But there are actually some cool character designs and ideas in this movie. The first 20-25 minutes are straight up bad, I would say. I didn't really get on with any scene on Earth. It was so dull. Pixar needs to mix things up. They're kind of putting their pinky toe into the more stylized stuff, but I find them a little bit flexy or obsessive with the tech side, where it seems like they're almost more interested in showing off sand physics on a beach than actually creating a world that you want to exist in. That was at least until you get to the alien stuff, which did have some fun designs here and there, kind of trippy and colorful. They even try and manipulate me with talking heads. They play Once in a Lifetime for a montage, and even that wasn't working on me, so you know something's up. Elio's just kind of a boring main character. It feels very much like we've got Lilo and Stitch at home, and releasing so close to the live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch did this no favors. But he's just such a similar character to Lilo, and I know which movie I would rather watch. But when this silkworm thing was introduced, I was kind of won over by it and thought that was the best part of the movie by far. Had a much more interesting arc than Elio himself, with the kind of gimmick with them being that they're these gross worms that wear mech suits, like power armor, weaponized power armor from this warmongering alien race. And from an animation perspective, there is a base level of quality, obviously, but this was a character design that intrigued me with some of the choices with how they have to emote with this somewhat limited design. You can't fall back on the eyes. You've obviously got a lot to work with the mouth. But the work they put into the body language and movement of this character I thought was really well done. With the antagonist, main villain, not only being the best voice, the most fun voice, but probably the most going on as a character too. It's not the most original idea, you know, a type of character that is scary on its face, but underneath is a squishy emotional bug. I like it. There could have been something there, and that was kind of an ongoing theme with this movie, outside of the obvious Pixar stuff. Family, parenthood, expectations. But what was I going to say? Yeah, it kept delving into these areas of intrigue, or shows something of say, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. I wish that was fleshed out or was in a different movie. Sometimes it would veer into going a bit too far with the designs. There's a weird amount of body horror with the clone technology, which was quite weird. Yeah, the weirder the better. They try to make the heart of the movie the Zoe Saldana character here, who's Elio's auntie because he's an orphan, because it has to be framed as the saddest thing possible, because it's Pixar and that's the meme. I'd quite like to see them try for a different tone for once. Like, there's a space for that, and we've got plenty of examples of it, but it feels like they are suffocated by this expectation that's partially put on them, partially enforced by their string of movies, where it feels like you have to cry. If you're not crying at the Pixar movie, it's not a good movie, it's nothing. It's like there are loads of fun, animated, enjoyable movies that I'm not crying at, that are not playing in that emotional playground. You know, I'm not crying at Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs or like A Town Called Panic, but I'd still call them great animated movies. So they're not really doing a very good job of fighting the creatively bankrupt allegations, especially now that they've positioned this as, oh, we tried something original once and no one cares. Now we just make Toy Story forever. Especially after reading that thing about Pete Docter pivoting away from personal stories. Just like, what? Universal appeal films. They were universal because they were personal. That doesn't even seem to make sense to me. If you artificially try to make something as universal and big and broad as possible, sometimes it can make it so it winds up being for nobody, and it won't find an audience. I guess the Elemental thing scared them, because that was more of like a personal story from the director about his struggles moving to a different country and immigrating. It just can't really find a voice. The humor doesn't work, the drama doesn't work. All this stuff on Earth is so dull. Which is a fairly big chunk of the movie, and is very much highlighted by, in the third act, where they try and pay off a bunch of the ideas they've been playing with. Throughout the first two acts, the B plot is Zoe Saldana and the clone of Elio on Earth, and it just has no momentum, and you're just kind of waiting for more space scenes. Then in that third act, it tries to bring it all together with the space debris action scene, which is supposed to be like, everyone on Earth is working together, and it's all very cheery and hopeful, and it's like, well, so I didn't really think that's what this film was about. I thought it was more about parenting and feeling like you don't belong somewhere and wanting to be a million miles away. So very clunky ending. A terrible beginning, a terrible end, but quite a good middle chunk. Just completely uneven and all over the place. It needed more going on. Even stuff like the score is so plain and generic. You know, they're doing the sad piano and the strings when it's a sad scene. What happened to, like, grabbing someone interesting like Thomas Newman and having, like, a harp and the most beautiful song you've ever heard for two robots flying around in space? This is one of the body horror things I was getting at. There is actually a decent scene on Earth with a single hair, like, crawling around in quite a weird, off-putting way. Again, the weirder it was, the more enjoyable it was for me. It seems like it's just taking the shortcut by aiming for the youngest audience possible. Talking about WALL-E, that was like a passion project for the studio that they'd always wanted to make, and were waiting for the right time. And that's also aimed for young kids, but someone of any age could enjoy that film. Whereas I could see kids enjoying this, but there's not much to get out of it. If you're looking for anything a bit more sincere or conceptually interesting, there's not a good enough of a hook here. So I mean, this was alright. Its biggest crime is kind of being so middling that it's forgettable and just doesn't move the needle any direction. I feel like I'd get more enjoyment looking through an art book of like these various alien background character designs Yeah, I'm just whipping up the Elio wiki, because it would do something like have this concept like the Universal User's Manual, which is like this figure-of-8 data stream thing that moves in a really interesting way, and there's a bunch of cool animation with these weird concepts, but it just doesn't really know where to put it or where to take it, what to feed it all into. So for me, this is a 2.5 star. Wasn't nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be. I'm actually going to give it a like too, because I did find it fairly likable. It's just, as I've been explaining, all over the place. So let me know your thoughts on E. coli, and also the Pixar film Elio, if you even knew it existed, because based on that return, we ain't seeing more of Elio anytime soon. Thanks for watching. Bye!